Hi Fundies! So I wanted to go over the end of chapter 8, which we didn't get to when we were in school together. We went over seventh chords, but we didn't go over transposition. So if you want to follow along on your own chapter 8 slides, please join me on slide 23. So transposition is basically going from one key to another, but if you listen to some of the videos that can be found at the end, and I really recommend that you do, then you already know transposition can really have a big impact on an ensemble. Certain instruments play in certain keys within another parent key. It's kind of crazy, but basically all of this goes back to when there were various types of instruments to play in different keys, and then also trying to keep the notes on the staves. Way back in the day, there used to be C clef staves, which we talked about briefly at the beginning of the year, and that C clef, which looks like this, was a movable clef. So this point could be on the top line, the second line down, the middle line for alto clef, and further down. And so instead of having the treble clef and the bass clef and these different clefs to determine different ranges, we just had this movable clef. Now in modern music, we've kind of simplified that. So now you'll usually see just the treble clef or bass clef. The alto clef is really only common for viola now, or if you're playing older music. Like I know I have played an alto trombone concerto, which is a totally different instrument, and you play it in the alto clef. If you play bassoon or trombone, playing solos in tenor clef is also very common, but that's usually, again, older music. Nowadays, we usually just see treble and bass clefs. So transposing instruments help to fit all of the notes that the instrument can play on the treble and bass staves. So anyway, there are a few reasons for that, but whether you like it or not, we have transposing instruments. So in this case, we see a horn in D, which is interesting because usually we're used to horn in F for French horn. So we have horn in the key of D, while violin, viola, and the cello, bass, all those bass instruments are in concert pitch. So the key for the concert pitched instruments is the key of D major. We have two sharps. Therefore, you can see the horn in D has no sharps or flats because the horn is already pitched in that parent key. So this is just a very simple version of a transposing score. If you play in an orchestra, violins, violas, cellos, basses, they all sound in concert pitch, so your scores are all in concert pitch already. If you play in a band, however, you will have a lot of different transposing instruments. Choir, also all concert pitch. So really this mostly applies to instruments you traditionally find in band. So here's our slide. I know you can read this, but it's our transposing and non-transposing instruments. All of the instruments here are considered to be called C instruments, which really just means they're concert pitch. If you play an E on the piano, it's the same E that you'll hear on oboe. If you play a F sharp on the flute, it's the same F sharp that you'd hear on the trombone. There may be some octave displacement, because like the flute sounds a lot higher than the trombone, but it's still the same pitch and they would be related by that octave relativity that we talked about at the beginning of the school year, where octaves are exactly double the hertz from each other. So they would still have that octave relationship, and all of these instruments are considered to be in, therefore, concert pitch. Other transposing instruments are pretty much other instruments that you could think about, the ones not listed here. And transposing instruments mean that whatever note is written on the staff is not the pitch you're actually hearing. You're hearing a different pitch than what's written. So we're going to have to be relating what we see and what we hear in order to understand and translate from concert pitch to transposing instrument and vice versa. So a C score is when all of the instruments are written in the concert pitch or in the pitches that you hear. But that doesn't necessarily mean those are the pitches that your performers are seeing. That would be a transposed score. So a transposed score shows you the pitches that your performers are seeing. A concert pitch score shows you the pitches that you're hearing. So a transposed score is actually very helpful, and usually more helpful for a conductor, because you can say, oh, your E flat is a little sharp, and it's exactly the E flat that is on the page. If you see that maybe the instrument is the instrument seeing an E flat, but it's sounding an F, then it's up to the conductor to transpose in their head. So usually transpose scores are more common. So here we have try it 6, where it's asking us to basically analyze chords that are including a transposed instrument. On the next slide, I have this expanded. So here we have what we saw before, where we have a horn in D, which is a transposing instrument, and then we have these concert-pitched instruments, the violin, viola, cembalo, cello, and bass. So what you see is what you get for the bottom 3 instruments. But for horn in D, you'll notice that because it's transposing, it's offset by a whole step. So violin 1 and horn in D are actually playing the same notes. They're playing in unison. So violin 1, and this would be violin 2, just for your reference, violin 1 is playing a G. This is also a G. Here's what's happening. This looks like an F to us. When a horn in D plays what they read as a C, it sounds D. The name, the key of transposing instruments refers to the note that they actually sound when they see a C. So when a horn sees a C, it sounds a D. It sounds a step up. That means their whole part has to be written down a step so that they actually sound the correct note. That's, in essence, what transposing instruments are doing here. So just remember the violin 1 part and the horn in D are in unison, completely in unison until you get to measure 44, and that doesn't really matter for our purposes. So these are the answers here. I couldn't get our half diminished symbol, so I just wrote it out, and I know, these are supposed to be superscript, but we're in the key of D major. Again, we have our key signature, and we have no key signature here because the horn in D is already in the key of D. So our first chord is a 4-6, which would be D, E, F sharp, G. It would be a G chord. It would be a G major chord because it's capitalized, and it would have the 3rd in the bass because we see that 6 there, so it would have B in the bass. So let's look for G, B, D. We have B in the bass, B in the viola. Remember that we're in alto clef here, D and G. So we have G, B, and D. B is in the bass. There's our 4-6 chord. And again, remember violin 1 and horn are the same, so that's why I'm kind of just ignoring the horn at this point. So then we have a C sharp. Remember in their key signature, C sharp, G, and B. And then this G resolves down to an E, and the B resolves down to a G. So we're really dealing with C sharp, E, G, and B. So that's C sharp, E, G, B. That's a C sharp half diminished 7 chord. It's a C sharp diminished triad with a minor 7 on top. Moving ahead, we have D, 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 F sharp, and which is strongly insinuating the 1 chord. D and F sharp, the 1 and the 3, with the 5th omitted until you get over here. And then we have our D chord basically rearticulated, but in this case now we have the 3rd in the bass. We have F sharp, A, D. So D, F sharp, A, really being highlighted in these 2 beats. First in root position, then in first inversion. Now, the chord on beat 3 strongly insinuates a 2 chord, which would be E, G, and B, an E minor triad with G in the bass. There's the G. This is also a G. So we have G, G, B, and E. And then we can see this B comes down to an E, and all that good stuff. Honestly, if I'm looking at beats 3 and 4, I'm interpreting this as more of a 5-7 that's happening here, kind of a 2-5-7-1. But for these purposes, that's not asking us to analyze here. We're really seeing an E minor triad with the 3rd in the bass. And then at the very end, we have D, D, F sharp, A, D, D. We have a D triad in root position. And that's it. So moving along, the next 2 slides are trying to give you a little bit of a visual about what's happening when you're transposing. And to be honest, sometimes it's a little bit confusing. So you can look at these if they help, but if they don't, I'll give you a better idea at how I think about transposing. So we're really trying to get to C. We're trying to think about where we are, what the difference is between where we are and the key of C, and then basically what we need to do to get there. So if we're in the key of F, we're trying to think about getting to the key of C. So if we're in the key of F, but we want, and we're playing in an instrument that plays in the key of F, but we want to sound like we're in concert pitch, we have to actually notate our music up a fifth. So that means if I'm playing French horn, which is in the key of F, and I want to sound like I'm playing in the key of C, I actually have to write all of my music in the key of C up a fifth to the key of G, because the French horn sounds down a fourth. So I have to play up a fifth from whatever key I'm trying to sound here. So we can see that arrow going up a fifth. And then this is kind of related to all these other keys as well. E flat, like alto saxophone, is a very popular instrument in the key of E flat. E flat you can either think down a minor third, or what is honestly less confusing is thinking up a major six. I know that that's further, but that's really what's happening on the alto saxophone. When they see a C and they play that C, they're actually sounding an E flat below it. So instead of going up a minor third and then doing the octave transposition, I honestly feel like just counting that major six down is a lot easier for me. The next slide is basically showing you half steps. That's what these little numbers are. So half steps away from C. So for instance, trumpet is pitched in the key of B flat, at least the traditional trumpet that you usually think of. So when a trumpet sees a C and plays that C, it actually sounds B flat. That's how we get the key of the instrument. So if we want a trumpet to play a certain note, we have to go up 2 half steps or a whole step from that note. So in this case, if we want the trumpet to sound C, we have to go up the difference, which is 2 half steps or a whole step. So if I want my trumpet to sound a C, I actually would write a D. Again, this can be a little tricky to think about because you kind of have to do a 2-part process. You have to think about what's the difference between the note, and then go back to the note that you're trying to target and kind of add that difference to it so you get there. You have to kind of translate by that set amount. So this is just a brief summary for you, and it's essentially warning you for transposing instruments. When you're looking at a score, think about the note that's actually being sounded by the transposing instrument, not necessarily the note that's written. So when you're analyzing a score and you're trying to figure out what chord is being played, you actually have to think about what notes are being heard, not necessarily what notes are written. So this is the last slide we'll go over very briefly. If you want to watch those videos in the final slide, I do think it's to hear other people explain how transposition works, just because it is a little bit different. We're not used to seeing this. So let's imagine that the whole band is playing in the key of E flat. You play an E flat on the piano, and that's what it sounds like. But you're a trumpet, and your instrument is pitched in B flat. What key will your individual part be written in? So when a trumpet sees a C, it sounds a B flat, which means that it sounds down a whole step from what's written. So if we want to hear an E flat come out of the trumpet, a B flat trumpet, we need to go up a whole step from that E flat so that the sound that comes out of it is the concert pitch. So from B flat to C is a whole step up. From E flat to F is a whole step up. So we need to write F because the trumpet is going to sound down a whole step from what's written. So the B flat trumpet part will be written in the key of F, even though the piece itself is written in the key of E flat. Now, because I'm running short on time, I'm going to explain the rest of Try It 8.7 in a separate video that I'll share with you guys. So know that if you have any questions, you can email me, send me a remind message, ask your question on Google Classroom, and I'll be happy to get back to you as soon as I can. Good luck with transposition, and I hope you enjoy your project for this week. Thanks, guys.